Welcome to your personalized deep dive. Today we're going deep into the world of power dynamics, strategy, all through the lens of history. We've got excerpts from the 48 Laws of Power, some fascinating historical anecdotes, even a few fables.
It's a really interesting mix. I'm curious to see how these different pieces, like ancient stories and even modern psychology, connect to reveal some timeless truths about power and human nature, of course.
Okay, let's jump right in. Law number one is never outshine the master. Seems simple enough, right? But looking at the examples you gave us, it's way more nuanced than just, being better than your boss at something.
The thing is, it's surprisingly easy to outshine someone without even realizing it. It could be your charisma or a natural talent, even just bad timing.
Like that story of the store Manfredi. He was this prince during the Renaissance in Faenza. He was a seemingly ideal ruler, good-looking, generous, loved by everyone. When Cesare Borgia, the warlord, conquers Faenza, he spares Manfredi's life but keeps him close.
Borgia, he was as clever as he was ruthless. He knew that even if Manfredi wasn't actually plotting against him, his popularity was a threat. People could rally around him.
So Manfredi's strength, his charm, it became his downfall just because of the context.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, how different skills can be good or bad depending on the situation, who you're with.
Exactly. And this next story really shows that. Sendo Rikyu, he was the tea master to the Japanese Emperor Hideyoshi. This guy was so respected, he even had his own place in the palace. But he got a little too comfortable, let's say.
Yeah, he had this statue of himself made wearing sandals, a symbol of nobility, and he had it placed in a very important temple. Now, for Hideyoshi, this was a huge overstep, like a peasant forgetting his place. Rikyu forgot that his status came from the emperor's favor, not some right he was born with.
This is a good question for everyone. How secure is your position? Is it based on what you bring to the table, or is it tied to how someone else sees you?
That's something to think about. Have you ever outshone someone in charge? Maybe without meaning to. Like you aced a project that made your boss look bad, or your ideas were a hit when theirs weren't. It's a good reminder to be aware of the power dynamics around you. Make sure you're not stepping on toes, even if you're trying to do a good job.
Yeah, it's not about being timid or hiding your skills. It's about being smart, knowing how those above you might see your actions, even your personality.
So on to a different but related law. Use smoke screens to disguise your actions. Deception, misdirection, creating a distraction so people don't see your real goal. We got some pretty clever examples of this.
Haile Selassie, the Ethiopian emperor, comes to mind. He had this image as a gentle, almost saintly leader, but he was a sharp strategist.
Right. This rival warlord, Balcha, wouldn't acknowledge Selassie's authority. He was marching on the capital with a huge army, so you'd expect a showdown. But Selassie did the opposite.
He pretended to give in, sent gifts, acted super submissive. Balcha totally fell for it. He thought he'd won.
But while Balcha was celebrating, Selassie was busy working behind the scenes, turned Balcha's allies against him. By the time Balcha realized, it was too late. His own men turned on him.
It's a perfect example of using deception to win without bloodshed. Speaking of deception, we got to talk about Yellow Kid Weil, one of the greatest con men in history.
Oh yeah, this guy's stories are wild. The one with Sam Giesel, this rich businessman, really shows how to create a smokescreen. Weil knew Giesel was greedy, looking for a quick way to get richer, so Weil had this scheme to sell him a fake property, a lodge.
And the big distraction, the centerpiece of the whole thing, was a boxing match. Val had a boxer in on the plan, made it look like a real fight, even rigged it so the guy got knocked out.
So while Giesel's totally focused on this exciting match, Weil's people are busy convincing him to invest in this lodge that doesn't even exist. Classic bait and switch, using something familiar, fun, to distract from the real con.
Makes you think, haven't you ever seen this tactic used? Or could you use it? Think about negotiations, competition, even relationships where revealing your true intentions could backfire.
It's about choosing your battles, knowing when to hold back, when to show your hand. A bit of misdirection can go a long way.
Absolutely. Power isn't always brute force, right? It's often about subtle manipulation, knowing how to use appearances to your advantage.
Now, for a law that's a bit more intense, shall we say, crush your enemy totally. Not exactly warm and fuzzy, but it has some serious historical and psychological implications.
It's about understanding that sometimes showing mercy to a defeated enemy can be a big mistake. History is full of leaders who learned that the hard way.
Yeah, like Basilius. He became a Byzantine emperor, but through some pretty ruthless means. Started as a stable boy, got close to Emperor Michael, rose through the ranks.
But Basilius, his ambition got the better of him. As he gained power, he became a threat. And by the time Michael saw the danger, it was too late.
Basilius had him killed, took the throne for himself. It's a brutal reminder that in power struggles, being soft can be fatal. And then there's Shang Yu and Liu Bang, two warlords fighting for control of China.
Shang Yu, he was the stronger fighter, a better warrior. But he made the mistake of sparing Liu Bang's life multiple times. Even his advisor warned him, saying, don't leave any enemy alive to recover. Even a small spark can become a huge fire. But Shang Yu didn't listen.
And guess what? Liu Bang, the underdog, he outmaneuvers Shang Yu in the end, proving that even a threat you think you've put out can come back to get you.
It's about being decisive, thorough, not literally eliminating rivals, of course, but about overcoming obstacles completely. Could mean cutting ties with toxic people, breaking bad habits, really going above and beyond to make sure you succeed.
Relentlessly going after your goals, understanding that sometimes being ruthless with anything holding you back is actually the best thing for you.
Of course, we're not saying be violent or cruel. It's about being strategic, right? Knowing that leaving loose ends can really hurt you in the long run.
All right, let's dive into a law that's super interesting but kind of ethically tricky. Pose as a friend, work as a spy, gathering information, using charm and, well, deception to get what you need from your rivals.
This was Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord's specialty. A French diplomat, this guy thrived in the world of European politics for decades.
Oh yeah, he was like a master of disguise.
Yeah.
Everyone knew him for his elegance, his ability to fit in anywhere, but behind that was a ruthless information gatherer.
At the Congress of Vienna, where all the big powers of Europe met after the Napoleonic Wars to redraw the map, Talleyrand was in his element. He used parties, seemingly harmless games, even spread rumors, all to figure out what other diplomats were up to, what their weaknesses were. He'd even leak fake secrets to see who reacted the strongest.
Like a spy movie. And then there's that story of the Athenians and the Corinthians. It shows how being practical can beat sentimentality.
The Corinthians, they wanted Athens to help them in a war, appealed to their shared history, past favors. But the Athenians weren't having it. They looked at it purely from a self-interest standpoint. Would helping benefit U.S.? No. Then we're out.
They even told their other allies that if they chose to help the Corinthians, it wouldn't be held against them. That's bold, showing they weren't going to be swayed by emotions or obligation.
This is a good challenge for everyone listening. How good are you at reading people? Can you see past what they present and figure out their real intentions? Because not everyone is who they seem, and sometimes the most important information is hidden between the lines.
It's about social intelligence, picking up on those subtle cues, understanding the hidden messages behind what people say and do, because knowledge, especially when it comes to power, is power.
Right. And this isn't just about manipulation, it's about being informed, knowing what's going on around you so you can make smart choices.
All right, here's a law that taps into something we all crave. Use absence to increase respect and honor. Seems counterintuitive, but it's all about how scarcity makes things more desirable.
Think about Sir Guillaume, this troubadour. He was trying to win over Lady Guilma, but she wasn't interested at all.
So, frustrated, he decided to ignore her, thinking it would make her jealous. But his absence had the opposite effect, right? It made her want him even more.
It's human psychology 101. We want what we can't have. The less available something is, the more we crave it. And this goes way beyond just romance.
Look at Louis XIV, the Sun King. He was the master of this. He cultivated this air of being aloof, being deliberately inaccessible to most people. It just amplified his mystique, made him seem even more powerful.
Being available all the time actually makes you seem less valuable. Haven't you noticed how people who are more scarce with their time get more respect, more attention?
It's about creating anticipation, making people work harder to get your time, your attention. It applies to careers, relationships, creative pursuits, everything.
Exactly. Not about being rude, but being strategic. Sometimes stepping back a little actually makes you more influential.
Here's a law that's super relevant today. Isolate enemies to weaken their resistance. All about how social dynamics and networks affect power.
The story of Pausanias, the Spartan general, illustrates this perfectly. He was winning battles, but made a critical mistake. He started embracing Persian customs, alienating his own people in the process.
He began dressing like a Persian, got surrounded by their advisors, even adopted their mannerisms, like he'd forgotten where his loyalty should lie.
And this seemingly harmless stuff had huge consequences. The Spartans, they're very conservative, saw it as a betrayal. By cutting himself off from his own culture, Pausanias was suddenly vulnerable. He lost his command and got exiled.
It shows the importance of understanding cultural norms, respecting them. Isolating yourself from your support system, that's dangerous.
And then there's the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang. He unified the country, built the Great Wall, but became totally consumed by paranoia.
Obsessed with security, he isolated himself in this massive palace full of secret passages guarded by eunuchs. Anyone who accidentally saw him was executed. It's a dark example of how seeking power can make you imprison yourself.
These stories show that power is inherently social. It relies on networks, relationships, shared values. Cut yourself off and you lose your strength.
Think about your own social circles, how you communicate. Are you accidentally isolating yourself, or are you well-positioned to maximize your influence and access to information? It's a balance, right? Independence, but also nurturing the relationships that actually give you power.
Exactly. And it makes you think about technology. It connects us in new ways, sure, but it can also create echo chambers, reinforce isolation, making us easier to manipulate and less effective at using power ourselves.
All right, let's get into the psychology of belief and the allure of the extraordinary. Play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following, tapping into desires and aspirations, creating that sense of awe and wonder.
Giuseppe Borri, a 17th century alchemist, is a great example. This guy amassed wealth and influence through pure showmanship and mystery.
He was a master at making people believe he knew the secrets to immortality, how to turn lead into gold. What made him successful was his ability to tell a good story, something that resonated with people's deepest desires.
He dropped hints about mystical powers, performed these seemingly miraculous feats, and kept himself shrouded in secrecy. Combined with his natural charisma and playing on people's hopes and fears, he attracted a huge, devoted following.
It's like he understood that people are just drawn to stories, to myths, to anything that promises something beyond the ordinary.
Right, and we see that over and over again. The rise of different religions, the popularity of certain leaders, even how successful some brands become. It's about tapping into that need to believe in something bigger than ourselves.
And it's not just about putting on a show or telling a good story. It's about building community, that shared belief, feeling like you're part of something special.
Then we have Johann Georg Schupak, the mountain doctor. He created this whole health cult around nature's healing power, drawing people from all over Europe to his village.
What's interesting is that he would incorporate these elaborate rituals and performances into his treatments. Music, dance, even theater. He knew that people were more likely to believe in something if it was presented in a captivating, emotionally engaging way.
It was an experience, a whole spectacle. It went way beyond just a normal doctor's visit. He played on people's senses, emotions, their desire for something more.
So what can we learn from these masters of persuasion? I mean, hopefully we're not starting cults, but we can use these principles to inspire and motivate others.
It's about understanding that people are drawn to stories, to myths, to anything that promises to take them beyond the everyday. We might not be creating cults, but we can use those same principles to inspire, to create a sense of shared purpose.
It's about those shared values, a sense of community, offering a vision that resonates with people's deepest hopes and dreams. Think about great leaders, entrepreneurs, artists. They create a story, a vision that people buy into, something bigger than just themselves.
And as with any powerful tool, we need to think about the ethics. It's one thing to inspire, another to manipulate. Make sure you're using your influence for good, not just for your own benefit.
Now, for a law that seems kind of strange when talking about power, give freely to create power challenges the idea that power is about holding on to resources, suggesting that being generous is actually a powerful tool.
Makes me think of Pietro Aretino, the Renaissance writer. He really understood strategic giving. He was famous for giving gifts to friends, strangers, everyone really. Built this reputation for generosity.
Which seems counterintuitive, right? Especially back then, power was about hoarding wealth, not giving it away.
And yet, it worked. People were drawn to his generosity. His reputation as a supporter of the arts spread everywhere. He understood that by giving freely, he was creating this web of obligation, goodwill, investing in his own power.
It's like he was playing the long game, knowing that real power isn't about what you have, but the relationships you build, the influence you create. It's about seeming abundant, generous, which is way more attractive than being stingy and greedy.
It's a good reminder that power isn't just about taking, it's also about giving. And often, the best way to gain influence is to be seen as someone who gives freely, not someone who's always trying to hold on to everything.
Now contrast that with Gonzalo Pizarro, the conquistador.
Yeah.
This guy was obsessed with El Dorado, that mythical city of gold.
He led expeditions into South America, putting up with incredible hardships, inflicting suffering on the native people, all in pursuit of wealth. But his greed was his undoing, found no gold, alienated his men, and died a broken man.
A classic cautionary tale, right? About how greed can consume you. Real power isn't about piles of riches. It's about relationships, trust, creating value for other people.
It shows the difference between giving strategically, like Aretino or Rothschild, and just spending wastefully, which can actually weaken your influence.
So how can you apply this to your own life? Think about how you view money, generosity. How can strategic giving, whether it's your time, resources, or expertise, actually help you gain influence? Sometimes the best way to get ahead is to give.
It's interesting how even something like generosity can be a calculated power move. Look at James Rothschild. He was determined to break into Parisian high society, but they weren't exactly welcoming at first.
So just being one of the richest men in the world wasn't enough.
Nope. He had to prove himself, show them he was worth their time, so he throws these incredibly lavish parties. Spared no expense. It wasn't just about showing off his wealth, it was strategic. He was creating a sense of obligation.
I see, making people feel indebted to him.
Exactly. By being so generous, he positioned himself as someone who could grant favors, open doors. It was a long game, not just buying his way in, but becoming a key player.
It's like he understood that to gain power, you sometimes have to give it away first.
Precisely. And this idea is not new. Lorenzo de' Medici in Renaissance Florence did the same thing. He was using those incredible art commissions, the public festivals, to solidify his family's power. It wasn't just extravagance, it was a calculated investment.
It makes you think, right? How can we use generosity to our advantage? Maybe offering our time to help someone, making a donation to a cause we believe in.
It's not just about being charitable, it's about understanding that giving can be a way to gain influence.
So, shifting gears a bit, what about this law? Create compelling spectacles. It's all about visuals, symbols, those grand gestures that stick in people's minds.
That's Louis XIV all over. The Sun King was a master of spectacle. His whole reign was like one big performance.
Versailles. The court rituals, all meticulously crafted to project an image of power.
Exactly. He understood that appearances matter. Creating a captivating spectacle, that was key to maintaining control and awe.
Those dazzling costumes, the grand balls, it was all part of his strategy. And the symbolism, too, like depicting himself as Apollo, the sun god.
Brilliant move, associating himself as such a powerful archetype. He was more than just a king. He was the source of light and life.
And then you've got his descendant, Louis VI, who completely fumbled this. His lavish spending, which was probably meant to project grandeur, just ended up alienating the people.
It goes to show, in times of upheaval, every move you make is magnified. What might slide in a stable era can become a symbol of your downfall.
So even the most powerful people need to be careful about how they're perceived, how their actions are interpreted. One wrong move can change everything.
And sometimes, one bold move can do more than years of planning. Think about Alexander the Great cutting the Gordian knot. That single act became legendary.
It was brilliant, so decisive. Cutting through all that complexity, it perfectly symbolized his willingness to break with tradition, to find unconventional solutions.
It shows how powerful symbolism can be. A single action can resonate with people on a deep level, become part of their collective memory.
So how can we apply this in our everyday lives? We're not emperors or conquerors, but we can still make our actions more impactful, more memorable.
Think about using visuals, storytelling, maybe a touch of drama. Whether you're leading a team, launching a project, or just trying to make a point, a well-crafted spectacle can make all the difference.
Okay, so this next law, isolate yourself to regenerate your power, seems a little strange in our always connected world. Aren't we supposed to network, stay engaged all the time?
It's counterintuitive, right? But sometimes the best way to recharge, to come up with your best strategies, is to step away from all the noise.
Take a break, get some perspective.
Think about Machiavelli, writing The Prince while in exile. That isolation gave him space to think, to observe, to develop his ideas.
It's funny how sometimes being forced out of the game can actually give you an advantage. You get to see things differently, study your opponents, plan your next move.
And then there's Napoleon, exiled on Elba. He was defeated, seemingly finished. But he used that time to regroup, come back stronger.
It's like he needed that isolation to become even more powerful, to learn from his mistakes, come back with renewed purpose.
It shows how isolation, used strategically, can be a source of strength. It lets you break free from the daily grind, gain a fresh perspective, come back with more focus and energy.
So how do we do this without actually having to get exiled? I'm all for self-improvement, but I'd rather not lose my job or country to achieve it.
You don't have to go to those extremes. It could be something as simple as taking a break from social media, scheduling some time for solitude, even just finding a quiet place to think for a few minutes each day.
In a world that's constantly bombarding us, creating our own island of Elba, even for a short time, can be key to staying sane, creative, and, yes, even powerful.
Okay, here's a law that's a little bit mischievous, maybe even manipulative. Stir up waters to catch fish. It's about understanding how disruption, shaking things up, can create opportunities.
This reminds me of Ivan the Terrible. He was brutal, but cunning. A master of psychological warfare. He seemed to use this tactic a lot.
He did. Like when he staged that fake abdication, suddenly leaving Moscow with his whole court, throwing the city into chaos.
A brilliant power play. He instilled fear, uncertainty, weakened his opponents, and ultimately came out on top.
It shows that sometimes you have to create a sense of urgency, make it seem like things are falling apart, and then present yourself as the solution.
So it's not just about creating chaos for the sake of it. It's about disrupting the status quo to your advantage.
And it doesn't have to be as drastic as a fake abdication. It could be shaking up a team dynamic at work to push through a new idea or creating a sense of regency in a negotiation.
And this law can be used in much subtler ways. Think about Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI. She understood that Louis was easily swayed by emotions and used that to her advantage.
It's a reminder that understanding and playing on people's emotional vulnerabilities can be powerful, though it's important to use that power ethically.
So have you ever been on the receiving end of that, manipulated emotionally? And have you ever, maybe even unintentionally, used someone's emotions to get what you wanted?
It's good to think about because it happens all the time. It's about being aware of our own emotional triggers, recognizing when someone might be trying to use them against us.
It's also about being mindful of how our words and actions affect others, making sure we're not manipulating them, even accidentally. It's a tricky balance.
Now, let's look at a law that encourages a bit of detachment. Disdain things you cannot have. This is about recognizing when to cut your losses, when to shift your focus to something more achievable.
This makes me think of Woodrow Wilson sending troops into Mexico to capture Pancho Villa after Villa's raid on Columbus, New Mexico. The punitive expedition, they called it. It was a disaster.
A classic example of clinging to a lost cause. Villa was a master of guerrilla warfare. He knew the terrain. The longer it went on, the worse it got for the U.S.
Wilson was so determined to catch Villa, to get revenge, that he lost sight of the bigger picture. He couldn't let go of what he couldn't have.
Now contrast that with Henry VIII wanting to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. He was obsessed with having a male heir, and when the Pope wouldn't grant the annulment, Henry took a drastic step.
He created the Church of England, declared himself its head. Talk about thinking outside the box.
He wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. It was a bold, controversial move, but it shows what can happen when you refuse to accept limitations.
It reminds us that sometimes walking away from a fight you can't win is the smartest move. Letting go of that dream that's no longer serving you, it can be tough, but it can also be incredibly empowering.
It's about recognizing when a path is blocked and finding a new way to achieve your goals. Henry still wanted a male heir. He just found a different, much more radical way to get one.
It's about being adaptable, knowing when to pivot.
So what about you? Are you holding on to anything that's no longer serving you? A job, a relationship, a goal that's just not attainable anymore?
Sometimes the most empowering thing is to walk away, create space for something new and better.
It's about recognizing the difference between perseverance and just plain stubbornness, knowing when to fight and when to walk away.
It's fascinating how these laws can seem to contradict each other. Sometimes we're supposed to be assertive, go after what we want, and then we're told to step back, be detached, know when to let go.
It's what makes studying power so interesting. There's no simple formula. It's about understanding the nuances, recognizing that different situations require different approaches.
So it's not just about following a set of rules. It's about being adaptable, reading the situation, and choosing the right strategy for the moment.
Exactly. And it shows that power isn't about manipulation or domination. It's about understanding the dynamics at play and using that knowledge to navigate the world effectively and ethically.
So as we continue exploring these laws, Let's remember that it's not about becoming some master manipulator. It's about understanding the forces that shape our interactions and using that knowledge to create positive change for ourselves and others.
Now let's look at a law that taps into a very primal human need. Play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following. It's about the psychology of belief, the draw of the extraordinary, and how to cultivate a sense of awe and wonder.
I think one of the most interesting figures who mastered this was Giuseppe Borri, that 17th century alchemist. Today we might call him a con man, but he was incredible at spinning a captivating narrative.
He claimed to know the secrets of immortality, how to make the philosopher's stone, the legendary substance that could turn lead into gold. People flocked to him because he offered them something they desperately wanted to believe in.
It's like he understood on a deep level that people are drawn to stories, to myths, to anything that promises to lift them above the ordinary.
Exactly. And we see that throughout history. The rise of religions, the popularity of certain leaders, the deaths of some brands. It's all about tapping into that human need to believe in something bigger than ourselves.
It's not just about a flashy presentation or a good story, though. It's also about creating a sense of community, a feeling of belonging to something special.
And then you have someone like Johann Georg Schuppach, the mountain doctor, who created this whole health cult based on nature's healing powers. People came from all over Europe to his village in the Swiss Alps.
What's fascinating is that he incorporated these really elaborate rituals and performances into his treatments. Music, dance, even theatrical elements. He seemed to understand that people were more likely to believe in something if it was presented in a captivating way, something that engaged their emotions.
It was a whole experience, a spectacle. It went way beyond just a normal doctor's visit. He knew how to play on people's senses, their emotions, their desire for something more.
So how do we apply this without, starting a cult?
It's about recognizing that people are drawn to stories, to myths, to anything that promises something beyond the mundane. We might not be starting cults, but we can still use these principles to inspire, to motivate, to create a sense of shared purpose.
It's about understanding those shared values, creating a sense of community, offering a vision that people connect with on a deep level. Think about great leaders, entrepreneurs, artists. They create a story, a vision that becomes bigger than just themselves.
And of course, like any tool for persuasion, we need to be careful about the ethics. Inspiring is one thing, manipulating is another. Make sure you're using your influence for good, not just for personal gain.
It's about being authentic, genuinely believing in what you're promoting, and respecting the people you're trying to reach. It's about building trust, not just using tricks and gimmicks.
Exactly. And be aware of the line between inspiration and exploitation. We need to be critical thinkers, especially when it comes to information and potential influencers. Is this message genuinely inspiring, or is it playing on my insecurities to get me to buy something or believe in something?
Now let's look at a law that seems almost contradictory when talking about power. Give freely to create power. It challenges the idea that power is about holding on to things, suggesting instead that generosity can be a powerful tool.
This reminds me of Pietro Aretino, the Renaissance writer. He really understood the power of strategic giving. He was famous for showering gifts on people, friends, strangers, everyone. He built a reputation for being incredibly generous.
Which seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Especially back then, power was all about hoarding wealth, not giving it away.
But it worked. People were drawn to his generosity. His reputation as a supporter of the arts spread everywhere. He understood that by giving freely, he was creating obligations, building goodwill, investing in his own influence.
It's like he was playing the long game. He knew that true power wasn't about what you owned. It was about the relationships you built, the influence you cultivated. It was about projecting an image of abundance, of generosity.
It's a good reminder that power isn't always about taking. Sometimes it's about giving. And often, the best way to become influential is to be seen as someone who gives freely, not someone who's always holding on to everything.
Now, contrast that with Gonzalo Pizarro, the Spanish conquistador who was obsessed with finding El Dorado, that legendary city of gold.
He led expeditions into the heart of South America, endured incredible hardships, and inflicted terrible suffering on the native people, all in pursuit of wealth. And it was his undoing. He found no gold, alienated his men, and died a broken man.
It's like a classic cautionary tale, isn't it? About how greed can destroy you. True power isn't about how much wealth you amass. It's about the relationships you build, the trust you earn, the value you create for others.
It really highlights the difference between giving strategically, like Aretino or Rothschild, and just spending wastefully. One can build your influence, the other can diminish it.
So how can we apply this in our own lives? Think about how you view money, generosity. How can you use strategic giving, whether it's your time, your resources, your expertise, to actually increase your influence? Sometimes the best way to get ahead is to give. Wow, it's incredible how these laws, pulled from history and psychology, can really be applied to so many different parts of our lives.
It shows that power dynamics aren't just some abstract concept. They're happening all around us, all the time, often in very subtle ways.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's bring it back to you, the listener.
Out of all of these laws, all of the examples, what really stood out to you? Was there a specific law, maybe even just a story that clicked with your own life?
Maybe something sparked an aha moment, like that's exactly what's going on with this relationship, or that's how I can achieve that goal.
Because that's the real value here,
Yeah.
getting a framework for navigating all those tricky situations we face at work, in our personal lives, even just understanding the world around us better.
And it's not about becoming some manipulative mastermind.
Right. It's about awareness, being more strategic, more thoughtful about how we use power, how it affects us.
Because remember, power, when used well, can be a force for good.
Exactly. It's about building up, not tearing down, inspiring, empowering, and creating positive change.
And that's your deep dive for today. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and maybe even had a few of those aha moments along the way.
The key takeaway, I think, is to apply these principles in a way that aligns with your values, your goals.
Because power used ethically, thoughtfully, can truly make a difference in your own life and in the world around you.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep using your power for good.